In this video, we're going to talk about rules of exponents. And this should be a reminder or a review. It's not new material that I'm introducing, so I'm not going to prove these things. If you should be able to prove them on your own by now if you're interested in doing it to help you remember them. I recommend doing that. Also, yeah, I mean, you're going to need to know these rules like the back of your hand, so make sure you really understand and know each of these rules. Okay, so we'll go through them and then we'll do an example where we need to use them. Okay, so the first is just that, if you have, so this is just, A is just some number, I have as some number greater than 0, and B is also some number greater than 0. And then X and Y can be any real number. Okay, so say you just had, the same base and then two different powers and you're multiplying them together. Same thing, that's the same as a to the x plus y. And then if you're dividing, so if you have a to the x divided by a to the y, that's the same as a to the x times a to the y, which you could then use the first rule that I've written here to say that, okay, well that's the same thing as a to the x minus y. All right, next, we have, a times b to the x power. Well, you can distribute as long as it's a product, or if you had a divided by b, you could also make that as a to the x power divided by b to the x power. So whether it's product or it's division, you can distribute the power. Okay, and then this is actually a very similar sort of distributing. Okay, so you can bring this power in. Lastly, this the negative power. So if a is to some negative number, then that same thing as 1 over a to that power, to the positive version of that power, or the opposite sign, really. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and use these rules to do an example. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do an example. One thing I just want to kind of point out first is that, so the square root of 30, I'm sure we know this, but the square root of 32 is the same thing as 32 to the 1/2 power. So when we're bringing, the exponent of 2 is the square root of 32, but 32 also has its own exponent. So I just want to point out that, that the exponent of something that's a square root is 1/2. Okay, we know this, I'm sure, but I'm just kind of pointing that out. Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead and get started with this one. So first thing we notice is that we have the same base, okay, 2 and 2, and they're being multiplied by each other. So I can bring this together. I can write this as a square root of 32 plus the square root of 2. Okay, that's using basically the first rule that was on the previous slide. Alright, now I can actually break this down further because I can break down the square root of 32. I'm going to do that over here. So the square root of 32, I can break that down. That's the same thing as the square root of 16 times 2. Okay, so square root of 16 times 2, which I can use the rule that a to the x, or a times b to the x, is the same as a to the x, b to the x, right? I can use that rule and then I can break this down. So this is the square root of 16, the square root of 2. Remember, x here is 1/2. The power is 1/2 when you have square root. All right, so this is 4 times the square root of 2. Okay, great. So now I go back over here and I write 4 times the square root of 2 and replace the square root of 32, and then plus the square root of 2. Now I can combine these a little bit, so I'll have 2 times 5, because there's 5 square root of 2's, right? There's 4 square root of 2's plus another square root of 2, so there's 5 square root of 2's. Okay, so now I can write this as 2 to the 5th to the power square root of 2. Alright, 2 to the 5th is 32. 32 to the power square root of 2. That is as far as I can simplify this.